So, Dr. McLain, I believe you have a case study to show us today looking at clinical evaluation reports. Could you please walk us through it?
Sure, yes I can. You need to share the slides with me.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Very good. Okay, so yes, I will be giving you an example of a clinical evaluation report that was submitted and accepted by the regulatory body that it was submitted to. Can we click? This particular case study was for a Class 3 medical device, and the intent was to do a global review of the clinical data to verify the clinical safety and performance of this device. Let's go to the next slide.
Sure.
All right, so this is an orthotic device. You'll see three different types here. Unfortunately, had to use one of these over here. These have tracheotomy holes. I didn't have to use that myself, but this particular unit people tend to depend upon it too much. It isn't complete. It doesn't completely immobilize the cervical spine, but it does its work. The center one is a bit more sophisticated than the one on the right. The one I was interested in was one that included this halo crown with the stabilizing bars, and there are actually pins that attach this at 4 points to the skull. Just to note that there are more than 500 manufacturers making these spinal stabilization devices.
Okay.
Go to the next slide then.
Sure.
Going to define the systematic literature review in the PICO framework. And you can read from this slide that PICO, P-I-C-O, is patient, population of interest, the intervention, the comparison, and then the outcomes. These were the descriptors that we entered into each of these PICO boxes. I don't think it would behoove us to read all of this text, but as indicated, I was interested in patients undergoing surgery, post-fusion spine stabilization. I was interested in the success or failure rate or adverse events, and then the timed ambulation, the rate of fusion, etc. Go to the next slide then.
Yeah, sure.
Very important for your stakeholders, whether internal to the company or external to the regulatory bodies, to develop pertinent key questions. And this will be the foundation of your literature review. And in this review, the specific questions were, does any single device system have a distinct advantage over any other system or any other procedure? I expanded that to include components of the system. We then went on to ask, do patients treated with any one system, which could mean your own system or a competitor system, have an advantage or disadvantage in these outcomes? And then finally, what are the reported occurrences of successful or unsuccessful outcomes for these systems, meaning adverse events?
Okay.
Go to the next slide then. So to begin this literature review, we had to come up with some general search terms that were pertinent to this clinical evaluation. You can see those listed here in the three different columns. We focused on the cervical area, but spine and spinal would be included in the cervical search term. The vertebra, of course, intervertebral, interbody. The operative part is the cervical area, and then the various parameters such as fusion, posterior or lumbar, transforminal, other words that we concluded, even after looking at some of the literature terms like resection, replacement, orthodesis, corpectomy. And in the last column, as I said, components may be an important part of the search strategy. So for a particular device of interest, it may have a component that that may be important in the recovery of pertinent literature for this review. In this example, I've replaced the actual client name with my own company name, Walker Downey Associates, so it's listed as WDA. But you could list your company name as well as other competitor company names in the search.
Okay, and I think, Dr. McLain, you and I were speaking earlier about the importance of having some knowledge in this area, and also, of course, the conversations with various other people to make sure that you find the correct terms to use.
That's correct. Again, these are the stakeholders. Within any company, there will, a medical device company, there will typically be a medical director who should be knowledgeable in the terms that are part of the lexicon of that medical device itself. So seek out that person, get these terms, experiment with these terms. The information specialist that you may use, or if you happen to do it yourself, will have knowledge also, because in the preliminary searching, words such as arthrodesis may pop up and may be important.
Okay. Shall we move to your search strategies now?
Let's go.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to build a query until we ultimately find the information that we need. So this was the first query that we built. Okay. The left box is the actual query with the appropriate quotations and mesh terms. The center column will just be comments focusing on that query, and then the last column will. That's right, and then the last column will be the number of hits, if you will, in the Embase program that came back.
Okay.
I think it's important to note here that the number 41,000 is intimidating, but it behooves you, again, for the interest of the stakeholders, to be able to state that you've looked at that and said, not all of this is pertinent. And by doing that, you will realize that there are certain changes to the queries that can be made to reduce the number of false hits. I'm not sure, Anne-Marie, do you want to give an example of this first query build?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Give us an opportunity to show this in Embase, as you say. So I'm just going to copy this, Dr. McLain, and I'm going to go into Embase, and I'm going to go into the advanced search, and let's copy and paste it in there very simply. But as you had ran a free text search here, I'm going to maybe give a little bit of information about these particular tick boxes here. And there's a couple of things to note in Embase. The map to preferred terminology means that you avail of the entry terms. And there are many medical device terms in there, and medical device related terms. And we keep building up entry with these particular terminology, and we just had an update recently actually, which you can see on the info site. So mapping to preferred terminology will map to the thesaurus, and then if you want to include a free text search, then you can do so, which means that you search for your terms which may not have been mapped to an entry term. And explosion search means you look for the narrower terms for that particular term. So I'm going to leave that on just now as well. And then I'm going to click on search right here, and we'll see what kind of results we get. So we'll see, and I think it was 41,000 searches you had at the time you did the search, Dr. McLain.
That's correct.
So we see here, of course, the Embase database is increasing on a daily basis, and you can see since you ran that search, we have considerably more articles now matching that search. So we're up to 56,000 there. There's one thing before we go back to your search strategy that might be interesting, because we referred to entry and the terminology. I'm going to very quickly, I just clicked on the thesaurus here, because you're obviously interested in cervical vertebrae. So I'm just going to look for that in entry just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. And you can see here cervical vertebrae is indeed in entry, but it's not what we call the preferred term. So it's not the entry term. What it is a synonym of the preferred term, which in this case is cervical spine. And you can see here a number of synonyms for this particular term. So going into entry is not a bad idea when you're setting up your search, as Dr. McLain pointed out. When you do that initial preparation, it can be useful to take a look in entry. And once you find a term that looks interesting and meets your needs, you can check out the synonyms to understand what else will be included in your search. If there are narrower terms, then you will see them underneath the term that you're looking at. So for example, cervical spine is a narrower term of spine. So an exploded search of spine will find cervical spine. And then you can indeed take that query to the advanced search. So that's one particular option. But in this case, when just to give you an idea, when we did that initial search that Dr. McLain showed you, then we found our additional results and brought us up to 56,000. So I'll pop back into your search, so you can continue there, and we can take a look at some other aspects of Embase as we go along. Shall I move to query 2?
Just a comment about
Yes.
the difference from 41,000 to 56,000. The search, the case example that I'm giving you is 2 years old now, and within that time period, 15,000 records were added. So that's important because according to MedDev 271, you're required to do this every year.
All right.
So in a period of 2 years, that number of additional queries could potentially have been put in there. And I think that's the basis for an annual CER review.
Yeah, that sounds relevant to me, certainly.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide then.
Yeah, sure.
So obviously going through the 41,000 was quite painstaking, but it quickly became obvious that there were common things in the hits that we didn't want. So we were able to modify our first query as indicated in the center column there by adding the various terms there.
Okay.
And that brought the number of search terms hits down to 14,000. And the same process was conducted again. Those 14,000 were reviewed until we found things in common that would allow us to modify our query to more fine-tune to the target we were seeking. You want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
Okay. 161 hits appears to be more manageable. And at this point, going through, we found just about everything in every article had something of interest to us. So in the interest of the stakeholder, I think it behooves you, I felt it behooved us to procure each of these abstracts and review each of them. And in fact, each abstract was included in the CER report. And I think that gives the reviewer who must look at this literature review the assurance that you were complete in your personal review. Okay, so we're now at 161. I think we'll go to the next slide.
Maybe this is a good point to point out the use of the medical device trade names and manufacturer fields in Embase, if that's okay.
Oh, very good idea.
Yeah, shall I just quickly show that? We can pop back into Embase because we were looking at this earlier, of course, when we were talking about the clinical evaluation report. And let me just show you how we did that. So when we were in the advanced search, we did mention, of course, the options here, which can make a big difference to your search. To do a free text search, for example, on cervical spine, will also include things like cervical spine fracture, for example. So something to think about. But there's also something here called field limits. So if I type in something that Dr. McLain used in his search to make it more specific and more relevant was halo neck. So I'm putting it in.
I think it was halo vest.
Oh, halo vest. I'm sorry. You know, I'm thinking. I'm thinking about the something completely different. Halo vest, indeed, it was. So halo vest, and then we clicked on the field limits here. And two interesting limits that we have in Embase are device trade name and device manufacturer. So when the indexers find a specific device name, they will put it in this specific field, and likewise with device manufacturer. So you can indeed search just in that field for halo vest, which we did. And let me run that search again. And we get 6 results, which is not huge, but certainly is very relevant. And if I click on that particular search, you can see here in our full record the device trade name, halo vest, and the device manufacturer. Now you can do that for any of your device trade names, either your own or competitors, or indeed look for device manufacturers if you're looking to compare various devices on the market. Okay, let me jump back to your search, Dr. McLain. So
Sure,
we'll jump into.
Sorry, my own comment on that.
Yes.
You were searching device trade name, and you remember from the earlier slides, I was interested in components of the device. So the term halo vest may or may not be a trade name. I can't answer that specifically, but the fact that it came up under a trade name was very interesting to me, because to me it was just a component of the search that I was interested in, and I find it fascinating that you're able to query by components themselves. Okay, that was just an aside for me.
Sounds good.
So as indicated here, this is the full query build for number 4 on the left, and then in the center what we did was actually remove certain anatomical terms such as cervix, and all of these, the 165 hits, were included in this final CE report. You can have CE reports that are 4 pages, or as in this case, a couple hundred pages. A large part of that may be the inclusion of every abstract for the purpose of indicating to the reviewer that your search was thorough. So why don't we move to the next slide then?
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, the previous queries included everything that is in Embase from its inception to this time and point, or at least to the time I did my search. My stakeholder was only interested in the period of time between 2000 and 2010. So as indicated, the search was run in 2010, and since then there's been 15,000 more hits. So when you add search term limits, it significantly reduces the number of hits. And as you can see here, we have 36, all potentially usable articles for review and inclusion in your report. Okay, I think we'll go to the next slide.
Sure.
Just building upon query 5, I added the term stabilization or immobilization, came back with 20 hits. These would be included in the previous slide, of course, but maybe more pertinent to the query itself with respect to the system and components.
Okay.
We'll go to the next slide.
Sure.
Finally, we were interested in randomized controlled clinical trials. As you understand, in a systematic literature review, you have the option to take different devices that were used in clinical trials and combine the data if those clinical trials were conducted in an equivalent sense. So that's the purpose here. When you're reviewing these articles, you're looking at, do they share the same control groups? Are they asking the same questions? Are they in the same patient populations? Many variables there that need to be considered when you're asking the question, can I combine the data for a meta-analysis? And that's ultimately what you want to do, is try to get that meta-analysis, because most clinical trials are by themselves very limited in numbers and don't readily lend themselves to expert statistical analysis. So as you build the numbers of patients that are being tested, you strengthen the statistical package that you're analyzing. So in this particular query, which is the last query, we found one very specific article that we felt addressed all of the key questions that we listed in the earlier slides.
Should we take a look at that article?
Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, let's pop into Embase again, and let me just go back to results, because one thing that we can also show here, because of course as you were building up your search, one thing that may be interesting to the audience is how they can work and adapt that search as more quickly and easily. And there's two things. So as I hover over a search, there's two things. I can edit directly in this field if I know what I want to add, or because I'm going to show you the publication years, and maybe you're not so familiar with Embase and you need a little bit of guidance, let me copy this to advanced search. And here you'll see the search publications from, and indeed we were searching the default all years throughout this, as Dr. McLain said, until a certain point we moved to specifying the years from 2007 to 2010. Now one thing here also Dr. McLain mentioned was major focus, which he used at one stage to see the effect that would have on the results. And that of course has a narrowing effect where you look for only the important terms in an article, but always has to be used with caution, because you are indeed maybe still missing relevant articles that you feel are important. So so we could change the year range there, and then we could go into search, and of course that will make a difference anyway to your results, as we see. But we did say that we were going to look at the article that Dr. McLain found, and this indeed was the article, I believe, the outcome of surgical and non-surgical methods in the treatment of unstable traumatic lesions of the lower cervical spine.
That's the one. Okay.
So shall we can take a look at the abstract. And yes. We can see that the halo, the use of halo cast we see here, and we see cervical spine cropping up. We can see the methods, halo cast versus surgery, etc. And then in our index terms, we can more easily see the important terms that were highlighted by the indexers here, and is largely why we found this article from the indexing, but also from the free text. And we see our controlled clinical trial and our randomized controlled trial. So we see already that there is a level of evidence included in the retrieval of this article.
I find it fascinating, too, that this is the archives of Iranian medicine, which one would not think would be the final place we find our evidence. But
indeed, yes, it will crop up in the least unsuspecting places sometimes. But as you said, important to get to that point where you find the evidence wherever it may be.
Exactly.
Okay, would you like me to bring up the slides again?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Let's go then to, so we're now going to slide 13, where I think you're going to talk a little bit about the journals that you found. Is that right?
That's right. Okay, so one would think intuitively that the journal Spine or the journal Spine Surgery would be where most of the evidence would be found. But in fact, as you saw, the Iranian journal was not one that was foremost in my mind. During this search, we found some fascinating examples in those other journals that are listed there. I won't even begin to be able to pronounce all of them, but you can see it spans the globe from China to Europe to Germany to Czechoslovakia, Iran, of course, Hong Kong, and Russia. So this is important when you're doing a global literature review, because let's not be focus-based. We've got to spread our wings and look at the world, and there are a lot of people interested in the same things that we are interested in, and they are publishing. These journals may not be in your local library, but fortunately there are programs like Embase that will allow us to identify them and review them if we think they're important.
Okay, let's move on. Excuse me. Let's just, yes, here we go.
Okay, remember now that we had 165 or so original articles that were of interest to us, and all of those were put into the CER report, and we made a decision as to whether or not they would actually be discussed in the report. Your decision is based on the GHTF SG5/N2R8 criteria. You can go to that standard, which is almost identical to MedDev 271, and apply these criteria, which are suitability, the description, and the grading system. Note particularly the grading system going in this slide from 1 to 3 in all cases, where 1 is the best and 3 is the lesser desirable. So in the left column, you're asking, is it the appropriate device, yes or no? Is it the appropriate application? Is it the appropriate patient group? And are the data acceptable to you? These are all important questions, and you'll be rating each of the articles according to this grading system that is in the column on the right there. Let's go to the next slide.
Sure.
Okay, and I gave you a very short discussion from a layman's perspective about meta-analysis and statistics. So not all clinical trials are the same. To be able to do that, to find that, I think you would be very, very lucky. And I can say now at this point that even with all of the publications that we identified, we were not able to combine any of them in meta-analysis. And we were forced to speak to the strongest article that we uncovered and conclude that, in fact, this particular stabilization system was safer than doing nothing else. So this is the second part of the grading system, and you're asking the questions, was the study design appropriate? A lot of this is intuitive. You should have some sense of science, and if you can't answer these questions, then you would go to your internal stakeholder who can. Again, on the last column over there, you're asking the question yes or no. Again, 1 is the best where 2 is no. And we can go to the next slide. And you'll come up with something like this. Now, I only list out of the ultimately 47 articles that I felt were appropriate for discussion in this literature review. I'm just listing the first 10 here as an example. The second row across the top, D, A, P, R, etc., correspond to the first chart of the grading system. The following rows are the values that were assigned to those individual references. So, for example, reference 1, D, had a score of 3, meaning it was the lowest. It was not very good. And we just go straight across each row and look at those numbers, and if you find one where you have a lot of 1s and a couple 2s, those would probably be, based on your review criteria, the most important to focus on in any literature review. And explain this. Okay, we'll go to the next slide.
Sure. Yeah.
This is just an example from that previous slide where reference number 7
looks pretty
had
good.
very, very low numbers, just 1, 2, 2 2s, the rest were 1s. So this one would stand out as something to focus on, and explaining the process of why you selected that is critical to a good systematic review. All right, and then I believe there might be one more slide. I don't plan to read the whole thing here, but this is an evidence-based process, and explaining to the reader how you arrive at your conclusion is critical to convincing them that it is a complete exercise. So throughout, I've explained that it's important to explain each of your decisions as to why you are doing this or why you were doing that, beginning with the formulation of keywords, including the internal and external stakeholders, having the queries reviewed, trying different queries, different manipulations of those queries, and of course examining each of those queries to fine-tune it to the point where you have a convincing article that the reviewer can feel very comfortable with. And I'm not sure if there are any more slides.
We've just come to the end.
Okay. Are there any concluding comments then? That you'd like to
No,
make?
I think for me it was very, very useful to be stepped through this clinical evaluation report, which of course was based, as you said, on a real life case that you carried out some time ago. And I'd like to thank you very much for your time and for sharing your expertise with us today.
You're quite welcome.
And we look forward to seeing you again.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.